So our next topic is the palynology. And as you already know how important it is for the UPSC mains examination, because UPSC have already asked the questions relating with the palynology. That is, what is palynology and what are its applications? Okay. So palynology, as the word suggests, it relating with the pollen. Okay, the study of pollens from the every possible aspect, as well as other microscopic structures as well. This will all include under the palynology. So in this particular video lecture, we are going to understand what is meant by the palynology. Okay, what are different branches of the palynology, how to study this particular palynology, and what are the benefits of studying this particular palynology thing. Okay, so all these things we are going to explain in this particular video lecture. So let us start what is meant by the palynology. Okay, this will be the introductory lecture, and in this introduction you will understand what is palynology and what are the different branches of it. Here we are dealing with the paper 1 and the chapter number 3, that is phanerogams, in which you have to study gymnosperms as well as the angiosperms, and we are here at the palynology. Okay, so we have to study the palynology of the angiosperms, right? So consider the first introductory slide, that the palynology, it deals with the pollen grains. Okay, actually it does not only belongs to the pollen grains, but every microspore. Okay, whatever the microspores were produced in the algae or the other genera of the algae or the fungi, here all the microscope spores, when they were studied under the particular branch of the palynology, right? So each pollen grain, what is the pollen grain actually in this angiospermy plant, is the minute body with a varying shape, structure and form in the male structure of the seed bearing plants. Okay, here the very important thing you have to remember, we are using the term the seed bearing plant, and as you know, under the seed bearing plant, the angiosperms as well as the gymnosperms, okay, both the seed bearing plants, that is the angiosperms and the gymnosperm, both the angiosperms and the gymnosperm produce the pollen grains, and hence we have to consider both here. Okay, only still we are considering the angiospermic pollen grain because this palynology topic particularly given in the angiosperm, but the palynology in and all includes all the microspores, whether it belongs to the algae, whether it belongs to the fungi, or whether it belongs to the gymnosperm. So all the type of the microspores we have to consider under this particular palynology thing. Okay, so the seed bearing plant possesses the structure pollen grains, and it is produced in the it is produced as a male structure. Okay, because the androecium is a structure which is responsible for producing this particular pollen grain. Consider this is an anther, and this whole structure is called as the androecium, and in that anther you will find the pollen grains, which are nothing but the male reproductive organs in the flowering plants or in the gymnosperms, right? So the seed bearing plants produce the pollen grain as the male gamete, right? See, it is transported by the various means of the wind, water and the insect. We already know in the gymnosperm category we have understood that the pollen grains are transferred primarily by the wind, right? But the other methods such as the water or the insects were also used by the various plants which belongs to the gymnosperms as well as to the angiosperms. Actually, majority of the angiosperm use the insect because they have the colorful flower on them, and these colorful flowers are powerful agents to attract the insect, because insects wants to collect the nectar from the flower, and in that respect these insects regularly visit the flower, and in this process they transfer the pollen grains from one plant to the other plant, right? And due to this the fertilization occurs, because the pollen grains were transferred by using either by the abiotic factors such as the wind or the water, or biological factors such as the insect. By using this they can transfer the pollen grains to the female structures, and hence the fertilization occurs there, right? See, in the angiosperm, the pollen are produced in the anthers of the stamens in the flower, right? Stamens, as you know, this is relating with the male reproductive structure in the flower, and this male reproductive structures individual members are called as the androecium, right? And on this androecium you will find a structure which is called as the anther, and this particular anther is responsible for producing the pollen grains. Okay, so the stamens are responsible for producing the androecium, and this androecium in turn produces the anthers, and these anthers produces the pollen grains in the flowers, which are nothing but the male reproductive structures, which will transfer to the female reproductive structures by using the wind, water or the insect, and in the process they can fertilize the fertilize the flower, and through this fertilization the growth of the fruit is occurred later, right? See, in the gymnosperms, it is formed in the microsporophylls of the microstrobili, that is the male pollen cones, right? As you know, we have already understood the gymnosperm structures. In the gymnosperm, the male reproductive structure is called as the microsporophyll, while the female reproductive structure is called as the megasporophyll, right? So, in the microsporophylls or in the microstrobili, the male pollen grains were actually got created. Okay, so the male pollen grains, these are created in the male cones in the gymnosperm, while in the angiosperm they were produced by the specialized structures which are called as the stamens. So study of these pollen grains or the other microspores, it all comes under the palynology. Actually, palynology is a very broad term. Okay, palynology, this particular palynology branch will first give you the idea about the pollen grain, then other type of the spore, for example the zoospore. For example, in the fungi you find the conidiospore. Okay, so all types of the spores which are present in the atmosphere or on the plants or on the living organism, this the study of all these microstructures will come under the palynology. So you should not get confused regarding this, that the palynology only deals with the pollen grains. No, other types of the microspores were also comes under the palynology. But majority of the time, because of the dominance of the angiosperm on the mother earth, as you already know, on our mother earth you will find the dominance of the angiosperms, and hence lots of the pollen grains are there. Okay, and the number of pollen grains is so huge due to the dominance of the angiosperms on the mother earth, right? So that is why the palynology largely based on the pollen grains, but still it will also consider the zoospores or the conidiospores, which may belongs to the algae or the fungi, right? So what is palynology? Palynology is nothing but the study of these minute structures or the microspores which belongs to the living kingdom, which is which can belongs to the gymnosperm, angiosperm, or to the algae or to the fungi. Okay, now consider this. See, some families, such as the Asteraceae family, show the different types of pollen grains. Okay, for example, this Asteraceae family members, the one member of the Asteraceae family produce the one kind of pollen grain, and the other member is producing the another kind of the pollen grain. That is, within the same family, you will find the morphologically or physiologically different pollen grains are there. These are different types of the pollen grains are produced within the single family. Then in such a case, we say that the plants are the Eurypallinous. Okay, the very important term, you should remember it carefully. That what is the Eurypallinous? When the members of the same family, for example, the Asteraceae family, produce the different kinds of pollen grains. Okay, pollen grains are produced, but they are of different types. These are different types of the pollen grains were actually produced in the family of the Asteraceae. Hence, such a kind of pollen grains were rightly termed as the Eurypallinous. Okay, what is the meaning of the Eurypallinous? Eurypallinous means the plants are producing the different pollen grain, but they belongs to the same family. The example for this family is the Asteraceae family. Okay, whereas several others have the single morphological pollen type. That is, the similar kind of pollen grains were produced throughout the family. Then in such a case, we use the term called as the Stenopollinous. Okay, what is the meaning of Stenopollinous? When we say the Stenopollinous, that they were producing the only one kind of the pollen grain. Okay, only one kind of pollen grain is when produced. Morphologically, is the similar kind of the pollen grains were producing in the family. Then in such a case, we use the term Stenopollinous, and if the family is producing the different kinds of the pollen grains, then we use the term the Eurypallinous. Okay, so the Stenopollinous and the Eurypallinous are the two kinds of the family that can be found in the angiosperms, under which we can classify the Eurypallinous or the Stenopollinous depending upon whether the produced pollen grains are different types or of the single morphological type. If they belong to the single morphological type, such a pollen grains are considered as a Stenopollinous, and if they are of a different types, they were called as the Eurypallinous type. Okay. Now consider this. See, such a polystenolous group are of a considerable significance in the systematic palynology. Okay, and the pollen grains are present in the number of features in the taxonomic interest. Okay, now see, understand what is the meaning of this. See, when we consider the Stenopollinous group, that is, they were producing the single type of pollen grain. Okay, only one type of pollen grain. This type of the Stenopollinous type of a group is of the considerable significance to the systematic palynology. Now, what is the systematic palynology? When we use the palynology in the systematics, that is to classify the plant, to nomenclate the plant, and to place the plant at a particular rank. That is for the classification purpose. When we use the palynology, in such a case, we use the term systematic palynology. Now, how the Stenopollinous group is important for the palynology here? The Stenopollinous group, it creates only the single type of pollen grain. So directly we can place all these members within the single family or within the single rank, right? So the single type of pollen grain, if they were producing the morphologically similar kind of pollen grain, we can group them together. Okay, we can use this particular criteria to classify the plant. And if they were producing the different kind of the pollen grain, we can place them into the another group, right? So whether it's a Eurypallinous or it is a Stenopollinous, both kinds of the plants were used in the systematic studies of the palynology. Okay, so when we use the paleontology in the systematics, we can use this particular criteria, that is whether they were producing the single type of the pollen grain or whether they were producing the different kinds of pollen grain. By using this pollen grain as a feature, we can use them to classify the plants, and that is why they are of a taxonomic interest. Okay, because they can help in the taxonomy, they can help in the systematics by giving a particular feature of the pollen grain to classify the plant material, right? So there were the families which are producing the different kinds of pollen grains. Then in such a case, we use the term Eurypellinus, and if they were producing the similar kind of the pollen grains, then it is called as the Stenopellinus, right? And it can be used in the systematic palynology, and it is of the great significance for the taxonomist as well, right? See, the number of the nuclei present at the type of shading is also significant. See, as you know, we have in the last lecture, in the embryology lecture, I have told you that there were the pollen grain, but this is not the final male gamete. Okay, now this particular pollen grain, it creates the vegetative cell and the reproductive cell. Okay, so vegetative cell and reproductive cell is created, so it can be considered as a two-celled stage. Okay, so the two-cell stage is here, and then after the reproductive stage will create the two different male gametes. The first male gamete, second male gamete, and the vegetative cell is there. So this can be considered as a three-cell stage. Okay, so two-cell stage and the three-cell stage were there in the angiosperm. When first the two-cell stage were formed, in which there is a germinative cell or the reproductive cell, or in the second cell is called as the vegetative cell. Now then, after the next step, the vegetative cell, the reproductive cell or generative cell divided into the two male gamete, the first male gamete and the second male gamete, and the vegetative cell is there. So it is considered as a three-cell stage. Now, whether when the pollen grain is shading from the plant, okay, that is, it is still present on the male flower, and when it is going to shade, okay, when it is going to shade, at that time, whether it contains the two-cell stage or the three-cell stage, it is also of a significance for the taxonomist, because taxonomist can use this particular thing to classify the plant as well. We can categorize the plant which shade at the two-cell stage, and we can categorize another kind of plant which can be shade at the three-cell stage. Okay, so the two-cell stage and the three-cell stage are there. These are two-cell stage and the three-cell stage can be used to classify the plants taxonomically. Okay, see, the most primitive angiosperms are shaded at a two-nucleate stage. Okay, see, the whatever the angiosperms which are primitive, okay, which were earlier present on the Mother Earth, and these were comparatively less advanced when we compare them with the advanced angiosperms. These are types of the angiosperms were always shaded at the two-cell stage. Okay, so two-cell stage. What are two-cell stage? These are two-cell stage is nothing but there is a generative cell and there is a vegetative cell. The generative cell and the vegetative cell are the two kinds of the cell which are first created, and if they at this two-cell stage the pollen grains are shading from the plant, they are going away at the two-cell stage, this type of the arrangement can be seen in the ancient angiosperms. Okay, so the ancient angiosperms were there, and these ancient angiosperms are liberating or producing or give away their pollen grain at the two-cell stage, whereas the more advanced group of the pollen grain shade at the three nucleate stage. Okay, so there is a division in the generative cell to create the two male gamete, so the three-cell stages got created. This type of three-cell stage is found in every kind of the angiosperm, but whatever the advanced angiosperms are there, these advanced angiosperms liberate their pollen grain only at the three-cell stage and not at the two-cell stage. Now in the two-cell stage, we say these are two-cell stage are the stage which comes before the three-cell stage, and at this stage, if the pollen grain shade, we can use this criteria to classify the plant, right? And if the pollen grain is shading at the three-cell stage, we can also use this three-cell stage to classify the plant, right? So the two-cell stage and the three-cell stage, these are types of the stages which are found in the angiospermic pollen grains. This can be used in the taxonomy as well, right? See, the angiosperms mostly have the pollen grains of the radial symmetry and the bilateral symmetry being found in the several of the gymnosperms. So generally, when you consider the pollen grain of the angiosperm, which type of the symmetry they were showing? They were showing the radial symmetry, while the bilateral symmetry is found in the several of the gymnosperm. So when we consider the symmetry, the angiospermic symmetry and the gymnospermic symmetry is different. The radial type of the symmetry is found in the angiosperm, while the bilateral type of the symmetry is found in the gymnosperms, right? Now consider this. See, the palynology can be divided into the various branches. Okay, actually there are the typical 9 branches in which the palynology can be studied. The very first is called as the palynotaxonomy. Now you can guess from the word taxonomy what we are going to do in this particular branch of the palynology, right? The taxonomical aspect is there, classification aspect is there. So the first branch is the palynotaxonomy. Then the second branch, it is called as the aeropalynology. Okay, as the word suggests, aero, right? It relating with the air, right? So the second branch is called as the aeropalynology. The third branch is called as the melissopalynology. The fourth branch is the forensic palynology. The fifth branch is the paleopalynology. Then the sixth branch is the capropalynology. The seventh branch is the entomopalynology. The eighth one is the palynodebris, and the ninth one and the last one is the lateropalynology. So all these 9 branches were there under the palynology. So palynology is not the single branch, but it contains the 9 sub branches, and from 1 to 9 branches, all the type of the aspects of the palynology covered in this particular 9 branches. So whenever you are studying the palynology, you will either belongs to the out of these 9 branches. Okay, these 9 branches are here, and these 9 branches are actually responsible for creating the whole of the palynology branch. Okay, so the various kinds of the branches, all the 9 branches, and how, what they do, and which kind of information they take out. Okay, this all we have to study, because UPSC can straight away ask you the individual of it. For example, they will ask you to comment on the paleotaxonomy. They can ask you to comment on the palynodebris. They can ask you to comment on the forensic palynology, because this is largely used in the crimes. Okay, so in the criminal investigation we use this kind of the palynology. So all these sub branches are very, very important to understand. Okay, now let us see let us understand them one by one. See, the very first is the paleotaxonomy. Now, what is meant by the paleotaxonomy? It is the study of the spore morphology of the embryophytic plants. Okay, so whatever the spores are there, if you study their morphology and use these morphological characters for the various taxonomical purpose, then we call this particular branch as the paleotaxonomy. So what we do under the paleotaxonomy, we study the spore morphology of the embryophytic plants and the pollen morphology of the seed plants. Okay, so whatever the spores are there, these are spores. When we study them, study their morphology in detail, and we try to extract the information out of the morphology to use them into the taxonomy, then in such a case we use the term called as the paleotaxonomy. See, here the one name is essential, is called the Professor Eastman's work. Okay, so here the Professor Eastman's work actually created this particular branch, which is called as the paleotaxonomy. See, on the pollen morphology has marked the beginning of the new phase of the plant taxonomy. See, Eastman and other many palynologists all over the world has made available the pollen description. See what they do. See, all the angiospermic family, whatever the pollen grains are there. See, this is the huge work. Okay, so whatever the pollen grains are there in all angiospermic families, the description of all these pollen grains were created by the team of the Eastmans. So once the pollen grains morphology of all the angiosperm is created, this can be largely used to classify the plant, or this can be largely used to separate the plant from the one another. Because in the plant taxonomy, what we use the characters, right? We use the different characters to classify the plant, right? So the plant taxonomy, whatever the plant taxonomy is there, for this plant taxonomy, these pollen descriptions are very useful. And who has created the pollen descriptions of all the angiospermic families? This credit is given to the Eastman and his team. Okay, whatever the team of the palynologist he has created, along with the Eastman, he has given the pollen description of nearly all the angiospermic families, including the most of the genera and the species to the taxonomist. So once this data is got available, that how the pollen grains are there in the different families or in the whole of the angiosperms, these are pollen grains nowadays used for the taxonomical purpose now. But this data, who has generated this data? This data is generated by the team of the Professor Eastman, and that is why this name becomes very important in the paleotaxonomy. Okay, so what we do in the paleotaxonomy? We study the morphology of these spores, and once we have completed the pollen description of all the angiospermic family, we have the complete database of a pollen grain, that which type of the pollen grains were found in the which type of the angiospermic family, and hence it is of a critical significance to the taxonomist, because taxonomist can use these characters to classify the plant. Okay, we can better understand how the evolution is there, how the similar kind of pollen grains can be grouped into the one family, and how the different kinds of pollen grains can create the different types of the ranks. Okay, so they can be placed in the the different family, or they add the different ranks. So the pollen morphology, or the all available descriptions of the pollen grains, can be used to classify the plants, and here's the term paleotaxonomy is used here. Okay, so see, the taxonomist employ the pollen morphological attributes in the systematic work. See, again, the obvious point here, whatever the morphological attributes we have studied about the pollen grains, if you study the pollen grains and take out its all morphological attributes, we can use this in the systematic term. Okay, whatever the systematic work is there, this systematic work can be done by using these morphological attributes. That is solving the controversial taxonomical and the phylogenetical problems, right? Because sometimes what happens, we do not find the definite characters to classify the plant. Now, when we do not have the definite characters to classify the plants, there are many controversies regarding the classification of the plant. Okay, so the limitation in the characters is the main drawback in the study of the taxonomy. So in such a case, the pollen grain morphology can be largely used. Okay, this pollen grain morphology can be used to understand or to classify the plant or to solve the controversial taxonomical problems. Okay, so the morphological attributes, once we study the morphological attributes in the systematic works, the controversial taxonomical problems can be solved by it, or the whatever the phylogenetical problems are there, we can solve it regarding the identification and determining the affinities, how the pollen grains of the similar shape and size, this can be used, okay, to classify the plant to solve the various taxonomical problem. Okay, so now you can understand why the paleotaxonomy is important, because there were still the controversial taxonomical problems, various type of the phylogenetical problems are there, because there is a less number of characters to classify the plants, and hence majority of the time there is a difficulty in the classification of plant. But here we get the new aspect, that is the pollen morphology. So depending upon the pollen morphology, we can solve this problem, we can solve this particular controversial problems, right? See, this second branch, which is called as the aeropaleontology. Now, the aeropaleontology is the study of the paleonomorphs found in the atmosphere. So, whatever the atmosphere we have around, if we found the pollen grains in the atmosphere, the study of this pollen grains which found in the atmosphere, it all comes under the aeropaleontology. The name itself suggests aero, it stands for the air, and paleontology is the study of the spores. So, whatever the spores which are found in the air, as you can see in this particular picture, how the pollen grains are present in this air. Okay, this plant is shedding the pollen grains, and these are spread throughout the atmosphere here, right? So, whatever the pollen grains which are found in the air, when we study these pollen grains in the air, this is called as the aeropaleontology. The term pollenomorph here emphasizes the pollen, spores, and the other bioparticles that are acid resistant. Okay, not only the pollen grains but also the bioparticles, whatever the bioparticles which belongs to the algae or which belongs to the fungi, okay, or which belongs to the gymnosperm, all are there within this particular paleonomorph. When we say pollenomorph, we are talking about every kind of bioparticle. Okay, bioparticle means the one which is living. Okay, such a particle which is living particle. Now here this particular pollen grains are living, right? Because these are the cellular structures, and the physiological or the metabolic reactions are going on. Okay, whatever the physiological and metabolic reactions are going on in this particular particle, hence we describe this particle as a bioparticle. Okay, so this bioparticle is generally the acid resistance, and this bioparticle is generally the living particle. So the pollen grains all comes under this. So what we say in the aeropaleontology, we study the pollen or the spores or the paleonomorphs, whatever these are found in the air. Okay, so atmospheric spore study can be considered as a aeropaleontology. Now see, the pollen grains have an impact on the human systems. Now here the one problem is greatly studied here. Now one specialty of the aeropaleontology is that they study the pollen allergies. Okay, so different types of the allergies can be studied under this aeropaleontology, because largely whenever the allergy is caused in the individual, this allergy is caused due to the pollen grains which are present in the air or the spores which are present in the air. These bioparticles is actually responsible for causing the various kinds of the allergies. The most common one is the hay fever, which is caused by these allergies, right? This hay fever is also called as the allergic rhinitis, is best known for the allergy of all, right? So the allergy is caused due to the bioparticle which is present in the air, and that is why this type of allergies were also studied under the aeropaleontology. Okay, so aeropaleontology, here the medical aspect is connected with the aeropaleontology, is that whatever the allergic reactions are occurring in the humans these allergic reactions are due to the bioparticles which are present in the air, right? And these bioparticles are responsible for causing the various types of the allergies. So these allergies can also be studied under the aeropaleontology. So once you see the name aeropaleontology, what is the first thought should be come to your mind? That whatever the spores which are present in the atmosphere or in the air, the study of these spores is called as the aeropaleontology. Okay, generally these are covering all the bioparticles, not only the pollen grains but all the bioparticles, and these are responsible for causing the various type of the allergies. The most common one is the hay fever, which is caused due to these allergies, right? Now see, the aeropaleontology comes under the purview of the aerobiology. Now, see, the aerobiology can be considered as a father figure for the aeropaleontology. That is, the aeropaleontology can be considered as a branch of the aerobiology that includes the study of bioparticles present in the atmosphere in addition to the pollens and the spores. So, the parent branch for this particular aerobiology is the the parent branch for this aeropaleontology is the aerobiology. Okay, so you should carefully remember the aerobiology. This is the parent term because this will include all the structures in the atmosphere. So this can be said that the aerobiology is the parent figure for the aeropaleontology, right? See, the aerobiological research paleontologists, in a collaboration with the clinicians, search causative agents present in the atmosphere that have impact on the human health. So not only the allergies, but whatever the impact is there on the human health, this impact on the human health is largely studied by the paleontologist in a collaboration with the clinicians. Okay, whatever the clinicians are there, whatever the medical professionals are there, along with the medical professionals, the paleontologist combines with them, and these are paleontologist and the medical professional together. They study how this particular aerobiological material is causing the various problems in the to the human health. Okay, so whatever the bioflora or whatever the polynomorphs are there within the air, the study of this polynomorph is called as the aeropaleontology. Okay, so this particular aeropaleontology comes under the aerobiology, and in the aerobiology, the paleontologist often collaborates with the clinicians, and they were studying the different types of the aeroparticles which are present in the atmosphere and how they cause an impact on the human health. Right? Now understand this. See, the third one, okay, the third thing term we are going to understand here is the melisopaleontology. Okay, this one is again interesting one. See, what is melisopaleontology? It is the study of the pollens and the spores present in the honey. Okay, so whatever the pollen grains which are present inside the honey, the study of these pollen grains is called as the melisopaleontology. So very interesting term. This term is called as the melisopaleontology, and this melisopaleontology deals with the pollens or the spores which are present inside the honey. See, it provides the information on the species foraged on the honey, foraged by the honeybees. See, this is very important. Now, what is the importance of this melisopaleontology? That whatever the honeybees which are foraging on the different types of species, by studying their pollen grains, we can actually come to know that which type of the honeybees is harboring or foraging or on which type of the species. For example, understand this. See, this is the one kind of angiospermic plant, okay, and this is another kind of angiospermic plant. Both are plants producing the pollen grains here. Both are plants producing the flower, and on the flower, both the plants contain the pollen grain. Now, here nearby you will find the honeycomb, okay. So, if you study the spores or the pollen grains which are there in this honey, and you find that the A type of pollen grain is there. Okay, for example, the A type of pollen grain is here, and then you come to study these plants, and here you will find the B type of pollen grain in this plant, and here you will find the A type of pollen grain. So naturally, you will come to know that these honeybees were foraging on this particular tree. That is, these honeybees were preferring this tree over this tree by studying this. And if you find the pollen A and pollen B type, both the type on this particular honeycomb, then you will come to know that both types of these species were actually foraged by the honeybees. Okay, so we were talking about the melisopaleontology. Now, under the melisopaleontology, we study the pollen grains or the spores which are present in the honey, and by using this information, we can actually come to know that which type of the plants were actually foraged by these particular honeybees, right? So the critical information can be created here. See, the identified plants provide the fingerprint of environment and the pollen spectrum from where the honey comes. See, this is also very important. See, for example, we have the complete ecosystem there, and the different kinds of plants were here. Okay, the different kinds of plants are there, the grasses are there, herbs are there, shrubs are there, the big trees are there. Okay, so in the nearby you will find there is a honeycomb. Okay, for example, this is an honeycomb, and by studying the palisomaniology, that is by studying the spores or the pollen grains which are present in this honey, you can come to know that which plant is actually forged by the honeybee. So for example, if the plant is harboring on this particular or foraging on this particular A species only and not on the rest of the species. So you will come to know that which type of the fingerprint of the environment these honeybees are using. Okay, so to produce the honeybees in a more quantity, we will plant the type A plant in the more quantity, right? Because the honeybees are preferring these plants to extract the honey out of it. So that is why we can use this particular plant in a large quantity, so that there will be the large quantity of honeybee will be produced, right? So from where the honey is coming and the which type of the fingerprint of environment is used by these honeybees, this critical information can be taken out by through this melissopanology branch. Okay, so it also provides the botanical and the geographical origin of the honey, right? That from which of the botanical material this honey is coming, this can we know, and which type of the geographical origin of the honey is there, this can also be known by us, right? So sometimes what happens here, you will find the honeycomb, but the honeybees are traveling far away to in search of the plants or the flower to take out this honey. So you can come to know that which type of the plants or which type of the geographical area actually used to create this honey by the honeybees. So you will come to know the geographical area, you will come to know the which type of the plants or which type of the botanical is actually used to create this honey, and it can also detect whether the honey sample contains the allergic pollen grains. Okay, because we already know the which kind of pollen grains were actually cause the allergies. So this type of the pollen grain, when the pollen grains of a one type, okay, is producing the honey, and this pollen grains is allergic, so so this kind of pollen grains which are present in these honeybees, we can identify it, and this allergic reaction should not go further into the public, so we can avoid this honey as well. Okay, so this type of information, that is the whatever the allergic pollen grains can become under this particular honey plant, and this honey plant can produce these allergic type of pollen grains, and hence it is very important to understand whether the honey contains the allergic pollen grains or not. This can also be studied under the melissopanology. Okay, so you already know now what are the different advantages, what are the main significance of the melissopanology, is that the melissopanology provide the various kind of information, that is the which kind of the plants were forged by the honeybees. This is the first application. Then it will also identify the fingerprint of the environment in which the honeybees are foraging. Then it will also provide the pollen spectrum from where the honey comes. Okay, from where this honey is coming, this information is also given by the melissopanology, and it will also provide the data on the botanical and the geographical origin of the honey, plus it will also give you the data of allergic pollen grains. So the melissopanology is a very important branch of the palynology in which we study the pollen grains which are present in the honey, right? Now see, it is an indispensable tool to authenticate the honey of the unifloral, whether the honey is unifloral honey or the multifloral honey. See how this melissopanology can be used to understand whether the honey which is created, it's a unifloral honey or the multifloral honey. Actually, when you have the honey, we can understand that if it is coming, if the unifloral whether the honey samples contain the pollen grain of the same plant as it is declared, and for example brassica honey, acacia honey, and the citrus honey. See, very important aspect is here, is that if you say the honey is a unifloral honey, then what is the meaning of the unifloral honey? See, the unifloral honey, whether the honey sample contains the pollen grain of the same plant. See, if the pollen grains of the same plant is found throughout the honey, you can come to know that it is coming from the only a single flower, single type of flower is used to extract the honey. Then in such a case, we call that honey as the unifloral honey, because this is coming from the single species. The one species of flowers are exploited to create this particular honey. Hence, this type of honey is rightfully described as the unifloral honey. Okay, and see, for example, here we have the brassica honey, We can label them actually. Then if the all the plants of brassica are used to create the honey, then the brassica honey. If the acacia plants are used to create the honey, then the acacia honey. And if the citrus plants are used, then we use the term called as the citrus honey. Okay, so the once we come to know that whether it's a unifloral or the multifloral, if it's a unifloral, we can actually give them a name, that honey. We can actually name that honey as a brassica honey, as acacia honey, or the citrus honey, depending upon whether the extracted honey is coming from the citrus plant, acacia plant, or the brassica plant. Okay, so this is also a very important advantage of the palynology, that we can distinguish whether the honey is unifloral honey or the multifloral honey. As with the common sense, the multifloral honey is that honey which is coming from the all the other species. Okay, that is the mixture of species are there. Many types of the flowers were exploited to create the particular type of honey. So no specificity is there in the multifloral honey. Okay, but in the unifloral honey, you will come to know that whether it is coming from the brassica plants or acacia plants or the citrus plants. Okay, now see, the next branch of the palynology is the forensic palynology, and as the name suggests, it deals with the criminology, right? See, the forensic palynology is the study of the palynomorphs that are used as evidence in the criminal cases. See, we can use the pollen grains or these spores, okay, in the crime scene as a evidence. Okay, we can use these spores or the pollen grains as evidence to investigate the crime, to know who is the criminal. Now, how we can do this? See, to resolve the legal problems as well. See, the forensic palynology also includes the identifying and linking the suspect of the scene of the crime. See, what happens? See, consider this is a crime scene, and there are few plants on this crime scene. Okay, understand this carefully. See, there are the few plants surrounding this area of the crime scene. So naturally, the whatever the pollen grains which are produced on this particular plants will be there in the air, right? They will be in the air, and they will be on the ground as well, right? So the pollen flora or the spore flora will naturally present on ground, and it will naturally present in the air as well. Now, for example, the crime has happened here. Okay, and the criminal who has done the crime has run away after the crime. Okay, so the whatever the criminal is there, this particular criminal has run away and he is hiding somewhere. Okay, so he is hiding here, and now the police is investigating the crime scene. So what the police do here? They take the samples of the pollen grains in the airs or whatever the pollen grains which are present on the ground. Okay, so once they come to know that the pollen composition in the air and the pollen composition on the ground, they hold this information with themselves. Okay, and now after the obvious suspects gather at the police station, okay, so the suspected crimes, so the suspected man were taken into the custody, whether for example, there are the 5 suspected men, and these are 5 suspected men which may have committed this particular crime were taken to the police station. Then in such a case, the palynologist or the forensic under the forensic palynology, all these 5 suspects will be analyzed, their clothes, their boots, okay, whatever they are wearing in their feet, they were checked for the pollen grains. If they have found the similar kind of pollen grains, for example, in the suspect 2, on their clothes and or on their feet, if they found the similar kind of pollen grains, this will confirm that the second number person is present at the crime scene. So the pollen grains which are present in the air or whatever the spores which are present in the air or on the ground, this flora of the spores can be used to trace the criminal. Okay, we can take the suspects together and we can investigate their clothes and the other belongings. So we will come to know that which kind of spore he is carrying. If the spores on the suspected's body and on the crime scene matches together, we will come to know that such a person was present at that crime scene. So in this way, under the forensic palynology, we can use the polymorph as a evidence to solve the criminal cases, okay, to solve the legal problems, right? Now see, the pollen grains are abundant in the atmosphere. We already know that, and the pollens and the spores are microscopic and may be unknowingly taken away. See, criminal don't know. The suspect don't know that he is unknowingly taken away the evidence with him. For example, these microscopic pollen grains are present on his head. He don't know that such a kind of pollen grains have already landed on his head because he has present at the criminal scene. So he is unknowingly taken away these particular microscopic structures. Okay, or sometimes what happen? He can left the these microscopic structures at the crime scene as well. Such a pollens and the spores can be used as evidence, okay, to solve the legal matters, to solve the criminal cases. So the forensic palynologist gives us the study of the spores which are present at the crime scenes. Okay, whenever there are the criminal cases at the crime scene, we will study the which kinds of plants are there. After studying the which kinds of plants are there, we study their pollen composition, and we will search for the similar pollen composition on the bodies of the suspect. And once we confirm the suspect with the similar type of pollen grains, we can actually use this as a evidence in the criminal courts. Okay, see, the pollens or the spores cannot be removed from the crime scene. See, this is very important. We already know what happens generally at the crime scene. For example, consider this is a crime scene and crime has occurred here. And for example, here is the first evidence, and here is the second evidence, third evidence, fourth evidence. And along with this, there are the minute spores, which are also the evidence of the crime. But the criminal, what he will think, he will remove this evidence, he will remove this evidence, all other evidence he can remove. But these are microscopic evidence cannot be removed. Okay, so this can be used greatly to solve the legal matters, because these are the very authentic material which cannot be removed even by the criminal, or even if he understands all the botanical concept, still he will not be able to remove all the pollen grains from his body or from the crime scene. So this becomes very important, because these pollen grains can directly be used as a evidence, right? See, the sporopollen is the major component of the pollen wall, and it follows the species-specific pattern. See, for example, the only one tree is there, and one tree is producing the one kind of pollen grain, and this one type of pollen grain will only attributed to this tree because of this presence of the sporopollenin on its structure, and this sporopollenin gives a very unique structure to the pollen grain. See, for example, the one pollen grain is like this due to the sporopollenin. The other pollen grain is like this due to the different types of this sporopollenin deposition. The third kind of pollen grain will be like this due to the different kind of sporopollenin deposition. So this kind of sporopollenin deposition is there on the spores, and the different kinds of spores were there for this species, and hence the pollen grains or the sporopollenin is very specific, and it's showing the very unique pattern. Okay, and how this unique pattern is created? This unique pattern is created due to the deposition of the sporopollenin. So this will help us greatly that at the crime scene, that this kind of pollen grain is present at the crime scene, and if such a kind of pollen grain is found on the suspected material, then we will confirm that he was present at the criminal scene. Okay, that persists for the thousands of years without any change, shape, aperture, and the sculpturing. Okay, so the pollen grain does not get changed over a period of time. So if the time has lapsed over a period of time, and still if you find the pollen grain on the suspect, still you can match with the original pollen material, because these pollen grains are not going to change over thousands of years. Okay, they will remain as it is. So it can be considered as a very authentic material in the criminology. Okay, now consider the pollen grains can be identified to the specific plants type, site, region, or the country, right? By using the pollen grain, we can actually trace the specific plant type, we can actually trace the site, we can actually trace a region, or we can actually trace a country as well, because these types of the plants material are sometimes endemic. This the particular kind of plant is only present in the one country, and it is not found in the other country. For example, in the New Zealand, this particular New Zealand country is the 72% of the flora of the New Zealand country is endemic to the New Zealand only. That is, the 72% of the organisms are not found anywhere in the world. Okay, and these were only present in the New Zealand. So so if the plants which contains the pollen grains, these are landed on the suspected's body, and he has traveled to the another country. For example, he has traveled to the India when committed crime in the New Zealand. He has traveled to the India, but on his body the pollen grains were found which belongs to those plants which are only found in the New Zealand. So from this information we can trace that such a person has been in the New Zealand, and he can be present at the spot when the crime has occurred. Okay, so the pollen grains can be traced to the specific plant type, can be traced to the sites, region, or the country. In many cases, the muds or the dust or the dirt are collected from the shoes and the vehicles. Okay, for example, if the vehicle is present at the crime scene, we can take the samples of the vehicle wheels. Okay, because this whatever the mud is present at the vehicle's wheels or on the shoes, these muds or the dirt can contain the sample of the pollens or the other microscopic material. So by using this information, we can trace the suspect, right? See, for pollen or the spore analysis. Okay, so for the pollen analysis or for the spore analysis, we can take the sample from the vehicle or from the shoes of the suspect. Okay, there are several codes where the pollen evidence become important clue that help to obtain the conviction. Okay, so there are now many codes where the pollen grains are the very authentic type of the material which can be used as evidence to give the sentences. Okay, now see, the next branch is the paleonology. Now, as you know, when you heard the word paleo, it stands for the fossil, right? So, paleobotany, we already know under the paleobotany, we study the fossil. Now, in the paleonology, it deals with the study of a fossil microorganisms such as pollen grains, spores, marine and freshwater algae, etc. Okay. So, whatever the microorganisms or the pollen grains which are in the fossilized form, okay, over a period of time, these pollen grains get fossilized by the some or other way. We have already understood how the process of fossilization is there, and if the pollen grains is got fossilized, and the study of when we extract this pollen grains and study these fossilized pollen grains, this will all comes under the paleonology. Okay, so what is paleonology? The paleonology is the study of the fossilized microorganisms. Okay, these are mainly contains the pollen grains or the spores or the fresh or the marine water algae which contains the spores. Okay, so microscopic material, if it gets fossilized and if and we are studying it, it will all comes under the paleonology. Okay, the study of the chitonozoans, for example, the animal remains, fungal spores, then the dinoflagellates, then the acritarch, and the other organism except the diatoms is also included under the paleonology. So paleonology is not only restricted to the plant kingdom, it will also address it to the animal kingdom, but it should be the microscopic. Okay, material should be the microscopic. Then this particular microscopic material can come under the paleonology, and it is not restricted only to the plants, but it can extend to the fungal and the animal spores as well. Okay, now see, the pollen wall is very tough. We already know the sporopollen is there, and it survive better due to the presence of sporopollen, because the pollen grains are found in abundant in the fossilized material. What is the reason behind it? Why the pollen grains got preserved over thousands of the years? It is because of this sporopollen. As you know, it's a very strong material, and this strong organic material is responsible for preserving these particular pollen grains for the thousands of years. Hence, the whatever the shape, size, and the aperture is there, it will remain unchanged for a very long period of time. Okay, for a very long term, the sedimentation or the underground processes are there, but still the shape, size, and the aperture of these particular pollen grain remain as it is. And why it remains as it is? Because of the presence of the sporopollen, because it is quite a resistant material, and the no other chemical activity or the enzyme activity occurred on these particular pollen grains. So there are the large quantity of pollen grains which is already get fossilized, and if you study these fossilized pollen grains or the other microscopic material, it will all comes under the paleonology. Okay, now understand this. See, these are properties of the pollen grain provides the means of identifying the unknown sporomorph up to the respective family or the genera. Okay, as you know, in the past, the many types of plants have got extinct. Okay, and we have studied the 3 extinct order of the gymnosperms, right? So whatever the plants which have got extinct, and if they were producing the pollen grains, we can still find these pollen grains in under the fossil form. So when we study the fossil form, these fossil form can be used to trace the plant, that which kind of plant actually were present in the ancient past. Okay, and once we come to know the pollen morphology, we can actually compare them with the present day form as there. Okay, present day form is also there, and we can compare with the present day forms of the pollen grains with the fossilized form, and we can actually use this type of the pollen grains to classify the plants, right, or to place the plants together under the classification, right? So the unknown sporomorph up to the respective family and the genera, we can place them, right? Correct identification of the pollen grain and spore is essential prerequisite to study the discipline of the paleonology, right? So the very first essential prerequisite or the first requirement is that the pollen grains or the spores. Okay, whatever the pollen grains are there and whatever the spores are there, you should first essentially identify it. Okay, the correct identification is absolutely essential for these particular pollen grains to study. Okay, to study them under the paleonology, we should first identify them, that to which plant these particular pollen grains are belonging. Okay, so under this paleonology, we are studying the ancient paleonology. Okay, the fossilized paleonology, and this fossilized paleonology gives us the idea regarding the extant plant types or the whatever the similar types of the plant flora present today. Okay, see the next type, branch of the paleonology is the capropaleonology, okay, which is the 6th branch. See, it is the study of the paleonomorphs present in the caprolite. What is the caprolite? It is the fossilized increment, okay, of the animals. Okay, whatever the animal excreta is there, If the animal excreta is there, this excreta is considered as a caprolite. Okay, so this caprolite or the animal excreta, which is present from the ancient time, if it this excreta contains the pollen grain, and if we are studying the spores which are present in this excreta, then this will comes under the capropellinology. Okay, see, the human caprolite is preserved in the dry caves. Okay, whatever the dry caves are there today, these are dry caves even have the human excreta samples as well, and these human excreta samples may have contained these pollen grains or the spore samples, because these are spores of the pollen grains may have consumed by the prehistoric humans, right? See, the pollens and the spore analysis of the human caprolite provide the information about their diet, right? Whatever the prehistoric humans were there, what they were eating, what is the diet of them, this can be identified by using the identification of the pollen grains in the caprolite, okay, of the human caprolite. If you use the human caprolite and if you find the pollen grains of the some of the plant species, you will come to know that this kind of the plant species were actually eaten by the prehistoric humans. Okay, so it can focuses on the diet of the prehistoric human, right? See, the pollen analysis of the herbivore caprolite. Okay, so see, if the caprolite is belongs to the herbivore, it will provide the data to reconstruct the composition of the pastures at that time. That is, which kind of the pastures, okay, which kinds of the grounds were there and which kinds of the plants were present on this ground. This can be understood if you study the caprolite of the herbivores. Okay, if you take the caprolite of the herbivore and for example you have seen the particular kinds of the spores or the pollen grains, then you will come to know that the species A pollen grain is there, the species B pollen grain is there, and species Z pollen grain is there. Then you will come to know their pastures may have been made up of the species A, species B, and species Z. So in this way, the critical information can be taken out from the capropellinology, right? See, the seventh one is the entomopellinology. As you know, entomo stands for the insect, right? See, is the study of a pollen grains that are associated with the insects. As you know, in the plants, the transfer of a pollen grains from anther to the stigma is typically done by the insect. Okay, many types of the honeybees were transferring the pollen grains from one flower to the another flower. So, if you study the pollen grains which are associated with the insect, this will all come under the entomopellinology. This study encompasses the melinopellinology, because as you already know, in the melisopellinology we also study the insect, because insects are extracting the honey, but these insects can be used. This study of the insect which extract the honey, it also comes under the entomopellinology, because under the entomopellinology, the insect, whatever the insects are there and associated pollen grains are there, these are largely studied. Okay, see, the researches on the honeybees and foraging distance of the insects and the pollination biology. So how the insects were foraging, okay, and how these particular insects are doing the pollination, and how this pollination biology can be understood through this entomopellinology. This all comes under these particular two aspects, which is called as the entomopellinology and the melisopellinology, because both of these branches will focus on the insect and the pollen grains. So through these studies we will come to know which type of the foraging pattern is there, then which type of the pollination pattern is there. So all these aspects can be answered by the particular these two types of the sub branches. See, the purpose of studying the entomopellinology is to find the relation of pollinator and the crop yield. Okay, so this is very important, because under the entomopellinology we will study the pollen grains. Okay, how we will study? We will study the pollen grains, and these are pollen grains actually is the transferred by the various type of pollinators. Okay, for example, this is an insect and this is transferring this kind of pollen grains from one plant to the another plant, and in the process the fertilization occurs, and after the fertilization there is a formation of fruit. Okay, so in the agriculture the formation of fruit is very important. Okay, and that is why this pollination pattern or these pollinators were actually deciding how much crop yield is going to there. Okay, so how much crop yield is there, it will all depends on the good type of pollinator, because every plant should get pollinated, and after the pollination there should be the fertilization and there should be the formation of fruit. Okay, so under this entomopellinology, the very important relation between the pollinator and the crop yield is studied. Okay, it is observed that the apples, melons, and the almonds, the yield increases with the increase in the pollinators. If we increase the pollinators, okay, now if the number of pollinators is increased, the yield of the apple, melons, and the almonds is also got increased. Okay, so studying the particular entomopaleontology, you will come to know that how we can increase the crop yield. Okay, so the very important agricultural application is there in the entomopaleontology. Okay, now see, the some pollinators are pest on the crops. Okay, see, not all the pollinators are good for the plant, but some of the pollinators are there which are also act as a pest on the plant. By studying the pollinators and the pest, efficient management practices can be developed to increase the crop yield. So once we study the pollinators, and we will come to know that there were the 20 pollinators are here. Out of it, the 2 pollinators are there which are causing the various diseases, and they act as a pest on the plant. Okay, so for these 2 insects, we can use the insecticide. We can kill these 2 insects in the crop field, and we will keep the remaining 18 pollinators for the healthy pollination. So in this way, we can also increase the crop yield. Okay, so in this way, entomopaleontology, which is a very important branch of the paleontology, which it can be used to increase the crop yield. Okay, see, the 4th one is the palyno-debris. Okay, now see, the 8th branch, which belongs to the paleontology, is the palyno-debris, is the organic junk or the organic matter found in the paleontological preparations along with the palynomorph. See, if you take the organic junk or whatever the organic matter remained there, and whatever the spores are present in this organic matter, or whatever the pollen grains are present in this organic matter, this the study of these spores or the particular pollen grains, it will all come under the palyno-debris. Okay, it has the size of the palynomorph and does not contain the sporopollen or the chitin. See, whatever the sporopollen is there and chitin is there, it actually got replaced here due to these other organic and chemical reactions. It consists of the charcoal and the cellulosic tissue fragments, like the wood fragments that escape the acetylysis. Okay, so whatever the remain is there in the form of charcoal, in the form of cellulosic tissues only, in the form of fragments of the plant only, this can be studied under the palyno-debris. So whatever the microscopic material is there, this microscopic material can be made up of the cellulosic tissue, can be made up of the fragments of the plant, and this microscopic tissue can be studied in the palyno-debris. Okay, so the palyno-debris are also the source of the microscopic plant material, and these palyno-debris studies will all come under the palynology, right? See, the palyno-debris is studied for its relevance to the polynophasis or the environment relationship. For example, if you study this particular charcoal, and if you come to know that some kind of particles were there in this particular charcoal, then you can actually determine which kind of vegetation were there in the immediate environment of this charcoal. Okay, so charcoal, actually the fossilized material or the charcoal is present from the thousands of years, and if you study the microscopic material which is present in this particular charcoal type of material, you can actually determine which kind of environment was there in the previous time. Okay, so this palyno-debris will also provide the information on the flora or the flora which is present in the ancient time. Okay, see, the analysis of the charcoal reveals much about the environment and the time of the deposition. Okay, at the time of deposition, whatever the environment is there, this environment can be understood by using this particular charcoal type of material for its debris, right? See, what is the polynophasis? See, this term is refers to the total assemblage consisting of the polyno-debris and the polynomorph present in the sediment. Okay, if the sediment contains the polynomorph, for example, pollen grain and other spore, plus the polyno-debris, for example, cellulose debris, other chemical debris are there. The collection of all these debris and collection of all these spores are come under the polynophasis. Okay, see, the assemblage characterize the sediment and reveal the environment at the time of the deposition. So whatever the environment is there, we will come to know that which kind of environment is there, that this kind of environment is responsible for deposition of such a kind of material in this particular charcoal type. Okay, charcoal type of a material, right? So to know the immediate environment in the surrounding at the time of deposition of this material is called as the polyno-debris. Okay, we use the term polyno-debris to extract the information out of the charcoal material, which these polyno-debris are present in the form of the break tissues, right, in the form of spores. Okay, broken spores are also there. So all these studies will comes under the polyno-debris, right? See, the final and the last one branch of the palynology is the lateropalynology. It is the study of spores and the pollen as applied to the human health problem. Okay, so the study of the spores or the pollens in relation to the human health problems, it will all comes under the lateropaleontology. It is known that the pollens and the spores are of a medicinal properties, right? Many pollen grains and the spores shows the medicinal properties, and these medicinal properties can be used by the human beings. Okay, in the under the lateropaleontology, we will come to know that which kind of the pollen grains are useful for the human health, and we can actually use these pollen grains to have a good health, right? See, for example, the Arabian physician in the ancient time used the Lycopodium spores, commercially labeled as the vegetable sulfur, for the treatment of the stomach disorders. Okay, whatever the stomach disorders are there, these stomach disorders are actually treated by the spores of the Lycopodium. Okay, this Lycopodium contains the very small spores, and these Lycopodium spores are responsible for relief in the stomach disorders. Okay, these Lycopodium spores were also called as the vegetable sulfur. Right, now see, the spores of the Adiantum philippines are used to cure the cough. Okay, for example, see, this Adiantum is producing the spores which can cure the cough. Okay, so the medicinal properties of the spores of the Adiantum, it can cure the cough as well, and the pollen grains of the Cycas cercinalis have the narcotic properties as well. Okay, so whatever the pollen grains are present in the Cycas plant, these are showing the narcotic type of properties. So from this slide, you will come to know that the pollen grains possess the various kinds of the medicinal uses, and these are medicinal uses. If you study these medicinal uses for the human health, it will all comes under the lateropaleontology. Okay, so this is the ninth one and the last branch of the paleontology, right? So this is all about this topic. Okay, thank you very much for watching this video. Please like this video, share this video with your friends who are studying the botany, and if you haven't subscribed to the Botany Capsule channel yet, please subscribe to the Botany Capsule channel for UPSC examination. Again, thank you very much for giving your time. See you in the next video lecture. Thank you.